So our moderator for today webinar is Brace Lowe. He is our Chief Operating Officer. He is our COO of Children and Family Services and also System Engagement. And System Engagement is the national arm of a Second Chance Incorporated. Additionally, Brace is the Black Administrators. He's the president for Black Administrators and Child Welfare. You might know it as the BACW. And he also serves as the vice president for the African American Strategic Partnership. Additionally, Brace serves as the president and he's the CEO of Lift Empowerment, which is an organization designed to help children in care and in the community. Happy to say that Brace brings with him over 30 years of experience in child welfare and in juvenile justice, and we are very happy to have his voice in today's webinar. And on a personal note, I want to thank Brace for coming up with this idea and sharing this idea with the team. And I want to thank him for the expertise he's provided for me over the last several years as I take my journey into child welfare. So with that, I want to hand it over to Brace.
Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. And thank you, Jay, for that gracious introduction. Certainly appreciate it. I'm extremely honored and humbled to be a part of this important discussion at this critical, unprecedented time. During high leverage moments, we must insert strategic resolve, best thinking ideas, and our collective knowledge in order to neutralize this pandemic emergency crisis emergency. I want to thank everyone in advance for your strength, resiliency, and response to this call to action. The purpose of today's webinar is one, to gain insight on how human service professionals can meet the emotional needs of their frontline staff who must remain healers amid COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, we want to hear the strategies to plan, address, and manage how we support our healers in order to remain diligent in supporting children and families. It's my extreme pleasure to introduce a local and national panel of thought leader experts in the sectors of child welfare, psychology, academia, philanthropy, and the faith-based community. When posing the question, how do healers who are conducting this important work take care of themselves in balancing their own needs and the needs of their families and the role of healers within child welfare? Our first esteemed presenter, Dr. Walter Smith Jr., will be speaking to us regarding interventions and strategy and the necessary balance as healers within the child welfare space. Dr. Smith comes to us as a licensed psychologist and board of trustee with Casey Family Programs. Dr. Smith worked 25 years as a clinical executive director of family resources and also served as deputy director for Allegheny County Department of Human Services. Let's give a warm welcome for Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith?
So thanks a lot, and it's a real honor to be here in Brace. Thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to present. So I just have about 10 minutes. So what I did was I made slides that I'm not going to go through line by line in terms of content, so I hope you get to them later. There's more information on the slides I'm going to be able to present. But the slides are important in terms of covering some of the specific strategies that I'd like to talk about. So the first slide is really about the basics, and I always start with definitions because they're not well understood. So stress, which we're going to talk about, is actually a response to any demand. That means if you stand up, you're stressed. That means if you walk, you're stressed. That means if good things happen to your life, it involves stress, because stress involves any time that we have to adapt to a demand. Trauma is a pretty different idea because it has to do with danger. And it turns out that, that chronic stress actually can be more damaging than really acute dramatic stresses. So right now what we're experiencing with COVID-19 is sort of the dramatic, traumatic end of COVID-19. but it's going to go on for a very long time. So there are different kinds of stresses involved, and a lot of today we're going to talk about adapting those kinds. In the second page, what I really want to talk about are some of the specific stressors of COVID-19. There are many different kinds of challenges that each of us are facing. One is the invisibility of the spread, the fact that this disease is impacting lots and lots of people that we know, that it's a very specific threat. It's a threat to our lives. People that we know are going to become ill, and some will die. And that it's constantly on the news. So it's changed our lives. So many different aspects of our lives now are different. We have to live differently. We have to adapt to work, to shopping, to going to the store. We have to be more disconnected from our ordinary supports, our routines. And the impact is going to be disproportionate, meaning that it will impact some of us far more than others. The unemployment rate is an enormous impact for many, many families. The social isolation means that we may not have the same social supports today that we had even just a few weeks ago. And the third slide, I really want to just focus a little bit more on vulnerable populations, because what we know about impact of general stresses like this is that it's disproportionate, that there are many people, people of color, people that are poor, people with fewer resources, people that have disabilities, people that are native and living in native populations and communities will have a disproportionate, more negative impact than many of us in the general population. So we just have to recognize that many of our consumers, and frankly, many of us, may be impacted differently than what we hear about in terms of the general population. And we're starting to now get on the news some of the data about the disproportionate impact on African Americans, and we certainly can talk about that later, because those impacts are significant and they're dramatic. The next slide, I want to get to the sort of meat of my presentation. So the way I teach about managing stress is, it turns out stress is not a bad thing. And that in studies, how people respond to stress really makes a difference in how people do with stress over time. And what that means is that actually you'll find that some people after stressful periods are actually functioning better after the stressful period than they were before. There's a whole host of other people that are doing much worse, and there's lots of people that are doing about the same. So what that means is sometimes stressful events make us stronger. Sometimes we learn skills, we learn ways of adapting, we find out we are stronger than we thought we were. It adds to our sense of competence and our ability to really manage things. And other times the stresses are overwhelming. So there are three factors that help predict when stresses are a problem and when they're really overwhelming, and when stresses actually contribute to our doing better. And those factors are: how much control do we have? Is the stress time limited or not? And how meaningful and goal directed are the activities that we're involved in when we're stressed? So we look at control. What we want to do is talk about these factors, and looking at this slide. We want to start to address, how do you, in fact, increase not just the control for yourself, but also maybe for your staff or even within your family. But having control over the stresses that impact us, or having control of our response to stress, really makes a difference in how damaging and how harmful it is. So what you want to do is really emphasize the self-care strategies, because sometimes I can't control what's happening to me, but sometimes I can really control my response to what's happening to me. So one of the big categories we talk about with this in psychology is this category called emotional self-regulation. And if you talk to me for 5 minutes, you know I'm really big on diaphragmatic breathing, which is a way of relaxing and trying to manage my emotional response, even though I can't control the stressful stimuli that are happening. For example, when I'm with families in my practice and they are really tense and anxious, one of the things I like to say about anxiety and stress is that it's contagious. The more attached and connected we are, the more when one person becomes stressed and anxious, the more easy it is for someone who's attached and connected with them to become likewise. So one of the things I practice a lot is how do I begin to manage my breath, calm myself down, and relax while staying engaged in the moment with a person who is stressful. This is a form of self-regulation. It gives me a sense of control over me, even though I can't control the circumstance. What I like about diaphragmatic breathing is you can do it almost anywhere. I won't go through the steps of it. You can look it up. You sort of email me and I can send you a handout to talk about how to do this. But it's also important in terms of control that we grant the people that we're working with and ourselves, we increase the structure and the organization of our workday and what we're doing in our clinical work so that we have more control. Studies will show that when, for example, child welfare workers lose control over their schedule and they no longer can control how they schedule clients, their levels of stress go up and the risk for burnout increases. So just giving your staff more control about what they do each day and how they do it, when they do it, how long they do it, also increases their ability to manage the work situation. Clarifying expectations for your workers and helping them to have more independent decision making about their work increases their control and also decreases of the possible harmful effects of stress. So, so control is one factor. The second factor I want to talk about is time limited, because it turns out that if I'm involved in something that's really, really stressful, but I know it's only going to last a very well-established set period of time, then I can endure the stresses a lot better. So if I'm in a graduate school program, it's really difficult and stressful, but I know in 3 months it's going to be over, then the stresses are much easier to endure. So how does one use this time-limited idea about how to decrease hopelessness when we're in a situation like COVID-19? So one of the things that we can do is we can set goals within specific time frames. So instead of thinking about, I'm going to be so much better when this COVID-19 thing is over, but we have no idea when that's going to be, I start to set time frames for myself, and I start to set goals of things that I can achieve within those time frames. So what I've done when I'm supervising staff is work with staff a week at a time or a month at a time and start looking at how do we use those time frames as a way of setting goals within those time frames. For example, in a really highly stressful situation, I can help staff determine what aspect of their practice are they going to work at over the next week to become better at doing. And while they can't control how long the stressful situation is, they can begin to set goals within that weekly time frame of things to work on. And it narrows the time frame away from, oh my God, this thing's going on forever, to, I don't know how long this is going to last, but within the week in which I'm really focused, there are things for me to work on, and I can work on achieving those goals within that time frame. So that means doing things like setting up stronger teams. Teams can work on goals that they can achieve within time frames. Again, those time frames can be daily, weekly. It means setting up shorter range goals, and it means keeping both our consumers and staff working more on the here and now, because we really don't have much control over what happens over time. And the last thing that we work on trying to manage in order to make stress more useful and productive is on meaning and purpose. And it turns out that if I'm enduring something that is stressful, but I really have figured out how to make the work at doing that stressful activity something as deeply meaningful and purposeful to me, then in fact it can be stress that is more useful. You'll notice when you're listening to the news, how many people who are volunteering to go to places where COVID-19 is really active, but they're going because to them, there's a great deal of purpose and meaning in going to New York City where there's a great deal of risk, but doing it because they want to actually help others and make a difference in the lives of other people. That kind of altruism and that kind of empathy actually helps us to make stress more meaningful. So this is a really good time to remind people the mission, personal mission, organization mission, professional mission of our work. Meaning it's a really good time when I'm stressed in situations like this to remind myself, why is it that I became a psychologist? Why is it I've decided to do this work? What is meaningful about this? Why is this work more important than the stresses that I'm enduring and doing the work? And why is it that it's important for me to show up, trying to be at my best each moment that I'm there? These kind of ideas can be really important in terms of pulling together our work teams and reminding people that we're working as a team for the best interests of clients, particularly vulnerable clients, and that kind of mission focus really does make a difference. So lastly, what I'd like to do is just show you just a few of my coping strategies through COVID-19. Because I really do believe as a practitioner, this isn't something I talk about, it's something that I do. So I've set up all kind of little goals for myself. I'm building things at home, because now I'm at home. I'm building a fence. My garden has never looked better. I'm working on cooking and dining each day. I work on having a routine each day so that my day is predictable and structured. I try to play classical guitar, so I'm struggling with that. So far, I've watched 245 episodes of Star Trek. You may wonder why I'm watching Star Trek. It almost doesn't matter, but it is something that I do that gets me away from the news, that I find relaxing. I try to really work on rediscovering my humor and irony. I've restricted myself to watching the news twice a day. I'm really working on listening to this great music on the hi-fi system that's actually positioned behind me. As you look through the me on video, working on staying connected to people, because particularly at a time like this when we're supposed to be socially distancing, I need to find innovative and creative ways to be connected. These are things that I'm doing for myself, but I have a really large psychology practice, and these are things I'm suggesting and working on with each one of my clients. So I specifically go not through exactly what I'm doing, but through all the different ways that each of us need to come up with a self-care plan that is specific and really addresses some of the specific ways we're going to manage on a daily, weekly, and maybe even a monthly basis how we're going to do good self-care. So thank you. That was fast. I went through this pretty quickly. Hopefully in our discussion we can kind of tease out some of the details, but I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely, Dr. Smith. Well, we certainly appreciate that. And, I want you to know I'm watching Star Trek as well. And so I'm a Trekkie. So thank you very much for that.
I'm glad
what I mean? Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. But thanks again, though, for that powerful, profound information. As healers in child welfare, we certainly will implement these critical healing points into our work and everyday strategy and our lives moving forward. So as we assess how the current child welfare landscape is impacting the essence of engagement with families, how do we consult, educate, and engage human service healers in this new normal from an educational perspective? Dr. Betsy Farmer and Eliza White from the University of Pittsburgh will address and provide some insight from an academia perspective as it pertains to healers. Dr. Betsy Farmer is the Dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh. Her background is in children's mental health and child welfare, with a particular interest in improving quality of care in out-of-home treatment for youth and mental health disorders, and in addressing the broader system-level issues to effectively meet the needs of children and families. And Eliza White is a family engagement program development specialist with statewide quality improvement department at the Pennsylvania Child Welfare Resource Center, University of Pittsburgh. Eliza supports statewide efforts to advocate policy and practice improvements, provide consultation and support while coordinating team efforts. Eliza has been practicing in the Pennsylvania child welfare system since 2003. Please, let's give our welcome to Dr. Farmer and Eliza White.
Hi, Dr. Farmer.
Dr. Farmer? Dr. Farmer, we can't hear you.
You can't hear
I
you.
did a really
There
nice.
we are. Now we can hear you.
Sorry, I did a very nice intro with my microphone muted. My mistake. Okay, so Eliza and I want to give a very brief overview for everyone to be kind of on the same page of thinking about what the effects on children and families are in the COVID-19 scenario, and then talk more specifically about how we support the workers who are working directly with families and families themselves. So next slide, please. So we really want to be talking about what physical distancing means for children and families. And I'm sure many of you have heard that physical distancing rather than social distancing is a preferred term at this point, because we want people to stay socially connected while they are physically apart. Next slide. One of the things that we know about working with children, regardless of how you do it, is the phrase that it takes a village to raise a child is absolutely true. And there are so many different influences in a child's life. And as we started thinking about this and talking to the rest of the panelists, we realized that there are also multiple meanings of child welfare. So the first is a general meaning that applies to all children. All children, we need to focus on their welfare, their well-being, their safety, their development, maximizing their talents and opportunities. And then we also, when we say child welfare, sometimes mean the very specific system that's designed to support that process and those outcomes for children and families who may be vulnerable in some way. So where there may be either a risk or a history of maltreatment, or where there are mental health problems, substance abuse problems within the family, whole range of issues that can bring families into contact with the child welfare system. And one of the things that we know is that in time of crises or disasters, that children and families who are served by the child welfare system are particularly vulnerable to the kinds of disruptions that occur in our society. So next slide. And thinking about what this means, just to put it in context for everyone, all children live in a nested set of ecosystems. And so there are risks and opportunities at all of these levels for children and their families. But if we think about it, and particularly thinking about children who come into contact with child welfare or who are already in contact, families are spending a lot more time together in a lot more stressful situations. So if maltreatment is already a problem, it's heightened in this situation. The system then comes into play also because people who are traditionally in very frequent contact with children, such as teachers, such as coaches, such as other people who may be working with them, as well as child welfare professionals, have less contact with kids. And so one of the dilemmas of a time like this is we're seeing lower levels of reports of child maltreatment because the people who are usually in touch with children and who are mandated reporters are actually not seeing children on a regular basis. So a lot of additional risks for kids in families where there already are risks. The stresses on families are huge. And we have to think about this at all the various levels it occurs, both emotionally in terms of issues that parents and other family members might be working on, but also the stresses of being together, the financial stresses of trying to make ends meet, the very realistic stresses of how do you get the things you need. How do you, make sure you're at the store at the right time to get toilet paper at the moment? And so these are not insignificant for folks who rely on public transportation or have children who have to go with them when they go somewhere, all kinds of things. So as we keep going out broader in the society, we see all of these other factors that are influencing and disrupted in children's normal supports and families' normal support systems. And as Dr. Smith mentioned, we also have to recognize that not everybody's affected the same. So as we get to the broadest sector or the broadest set of circles, we have to remember all of the systemic and historical racism and oppression that are in our society have set up kind of a perfect storm for people to be exceptionally vulnerable when these kind of shocks come to the system. And in addition to that, at this point in history, we're seeing some real xenophobia and bias and attacks against folks, particularly of Asian descent, that are on top of and impacting all of these more immediate concerns that affect people. So I just wanted to put that all in context of all of the issues that families and children are dealing with, and all of the issues that workers within the child welfare system have to be aware of to be able to effectively deal with families through this. And now I'm going to turn it over to Eliza to talk more about actually working with the workers who are working with the families. So the next slide for Eliza. Eliza, we cannot hear you.
Thank you. It appeared I was muted twice. Good afternoon. So as mentioned, the critical functions of the child welfare system must be maintained during this time to assure children's safety, well-being, and permanency. And in doing so, there are many concerns that challenge not only county child welfare agencies, but private providers and the families being helped. These overlapping concerns include exposure to COVID-19, lack of personal protective equipment, financial hardship, as mentioned, children in the system having decreased contact with families and possibly delay in reunification, and workforce capacity issues. As we know, this has upset every part of our lives, and the disruption is felt by all professionals who care for children and families. Child welfare professionals are working to reshape the way they engage and team with families. In this reshaping, to conduct themselves in different manners to protect their own safety as well, it's important that we remember the skills, values, and principles that are set forth in the foundation of Pennsylvania child welfare. And those are mentioned in the practice model, which is on the right-hand side of your slide. While there are many areas to consider, in preparing for this webinar, 3 stood out: the parallel process, transparency, and cross-systems collaboration. The parallel process, helping others and ourselves, is not a concept that most of us are used to doing at the same point in time. Those providing direct practice are also facing those same uncertain times, and they too must help themselves and their families, along with the children and families that they're serving through the child welfare system. For those living and working in the same community, this may be a time where you're working to seek the same or similar resources for yourself and those that you're helping. It's going to be vastly important that we don't make assumptions during this time, as the families and children we're helping have a unique set of circumstances and needs, and we need to treat all families where they are at, including our own. As agencies supervising child welfare professionals, we must recognize that each staff person and their families also have unique sets of circumstances, and some may require more support to adequately meet the needs of children and families while juggling their own needs for themselves and their families. We are all modeling how to deal with this crisis, whether for our communities, our staff, the families we're serving, and our own children. We are not helpless in this. Transparency. Transparency, you may have heard by now, it's okay to not feel okay. There is a lot of information and guidelines coming at us each day. In an ever-changing and evolving system, we know that change does not come easy, especially one disrupting both personal and professional lives all at once. We are looking for those that we can trust in the midst of uncertainty, and so are our families that we're serving. Honesty and transparency is important in our everyday work, as it is the foundation that builds those trusting relationships. And during this trying time, we must provide ourselves and those we're supporting with that same transparent communication. Part of that transparent communication is not having all of the answers and feeling okay to say that to others. That doesn't mean we're not working on finding those answers. It's just okay not to have them. It's also okay to mention the awkwardness and the recognition that we're using means that are not the most ideal to engage in team, like virtual meetings and visits. And it is okay to express that. Cross-systems collaboration. As helpers and healers to the community, we may feel moments of that helplessness and loneliness in this uphill battle. But this is when we really need to recognize that we're not alone, and together we are stronger. Reaching out to other organizations and becoming familiar with what they're providing. That allows us to really be able to offer innovations to the families that we're working with and connect them to those resources. Prevention and treatment of child maltreatment is a collaborative effort, and this collaboration must continue amongst families, communities, child welfare professionals, healthcare providers, educators, kinship foster parents, mental health and drug and alcohol professionals, as well as many others. We are all seeking those same resources to keep ourselves and the children and families being served safe. All efforts at the state and local levels are valued, and we really need to make sure that we're understanding of each other's efforts so that we can direct families and children to the resources that are going to best address their needs. And in wrapping up this section, I would just like to say that it's apparent that partners across the state are working tirelessly to provide resources to help families connect to tools, supporting those local resources, as well as guidance around fieldwork practice and ways to utilize other forms of technology to meet children and families. And lastly, I would just like to say, while we are all moving forward, there are going to be opportunities in forging innovative collaborative partnerships that will benefit our families long after this crisis has passed, knowing that we are stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Dr. Farmer and Eliza, for that impactful, profound information. We definitely, certainly will think about our healing together as a team, collectively, and with our families. And so that was very good, robust information for us to really take back as we continue to fight through this pandemic. The pandemic emergency has challenged many aspects of the child welfare system and organizations across the country. With the increased unemployment claims and financial hardships on businesses, what is the role of philanthropy in supporting the well-being of organizations so they can confidently maintain their roles as community healers? Dr. Cheryl Hall Russell will provide the insight and knowledge from the philanthropic perspective. And in introducing Dr. Russell, she's the president and chief cultural consultant for Black Wise Women, LLC, a research-based diversity, equity, and inclusion firm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Additionally, she facilitates community-based collaboratives, helping to build neighborhood ecosystems that are relevant and responsive to community needs. She's known for her authentic leadership style And as a demand as a speaker and panelist. Dr. Russell also serves as a professor of quality research methods. Please welcome Dr. Russell.
Thank you so much. I want to say right away that I am coming to you as a reformed nonprofit leader with 20 plus years in this field. So I have spent a lot of time working in and with philanthropy, philanthropic institutions, and never more than right now. We are having a lot of conversations. My message today is probably going to find its perch more with leaders of nonprofits who are struggling with how to be whole right now. And so we can move it to my first slide. I'm talking a little bit about shifting. And we hear the term paradigm shift so much, and it can be an overused cliche, but I can't think of a better term right now. We are literally moving in a very huge way into another realm. And we've got to be ready to mourn the old and be ready to really open ourselves up for the new. And I know that's hard to think about right now with all the responsibilities that we have on ourselves, but the only way to really get through this is trying to think about what is this thing going to look like on the other side, and what are you doing to prepare yourself to get there. One of the things I can tell you about philanthropy right now is that they're doing some circling too. They are. It's not just you thinking about how am I going to keep my agency and those people I care about whole. Philanthropy is going through pretty huge paradigm shifts as well. They're trying to figure out how to get money on the streets a lot faster. They're trying to figure out how to do things that they never really had to do in quick order. So they are concerned about their staffs and their mission and how, what they said they were going to do with their strategic plans, as much as nonprofit leaders are, and how they're going to get to the other side of this. So know that there is no, as much as we want to think, and I think we're finding this out about a lot of systems, that everything's together. When an emergency comes, everybody's ready to shift. When there's something this big, there's a lot of folks who are having to kind of sort it out. It's clumsy, it's awkward, but it does really provide some space for us to look at systems and start to make some needed changes. So understand that you are not alone. One of the last things I want to say on this section is this isn't a temporary shift. I think what I've been hearing a lot is this is a permanent change. We don't know what exactly is on the other side of this, but we know the routines that we were in before, how we work together, how we did collaborations, how we work with philanthropic institutions. I think a lot of this is going to be open for debate, but I don't think we'll ever look exactly the same again. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. We can move to the next slide. So there are indeed opportunities at a time when it doesn't feel like there are any. And so, yeah, you're in a crisis, but there are these changing relationships I was talking about with philanthropy. And so one of the things I'm hearing a lot now is finding ways to talk to them about doing this differently. This is amazingly stressful for leaders, and you can't, you don't have the ability just to sit still during this. You have to nurture yourself, but you also have to move to look out for your family, but also those folks who count on you every day, your staff, your communities. And so how are you dealing with philanthropy differently? Well, I'm hearing some people go back and say, these are the dollars that we got for programs. Can we use them for operations? It is one method that is being used to kind of pivot where you are now to what you need to be able to continue to offer kind of emergency services to your teams. And I'm hearing some philanthropic agencies are more than happy to allow you to kind of adjust those dollars that you already have and have committed. And later on, they're going to worry about what those outcomes look like. But right now, they are highly aware that you're going to have to do business differently. So don't panic about that. Don't look at your list and say, these are the outcomes we said we were going to have. We've got to do this report by June. Everybody knows that you're going to have to do this differently. So I beg of you to kind of be bold enough to get on with your funders and tell them where you are now and how you think you should make changes in order to be in a better place and to survive this. It's a good time to look at systems changes. We are looking at the faults in our systems pretty clearly right now. We're seeing where the cracks are in those systems. I did a webinar yesterday that looked at the fault lines on race and socioeconomic status. Those things that were already in bad shape for us as in the U.S. are really being tested now during this crisis. Write down and keep track of those things that are not going well, that are failing, that we know in the big picture we need to really address in short order. We need to have some long-term systems changes. And when you say that, it sounds so big, but guess what? You're a part of making those changes. Understand that and be ready to be bold enough to have those conversations as this crisis starts to lighten a little bit. Also, what's made you as vulnerable as you are right now? I know it's painful to think about, but it could be a good time to look at what is making you really vulnerable and to consider a pivot. Now, that word pivot is being a little bit overused for me right now because people act like whatever it was you were doing, you could suddenly pivot and do something else. I don't know that that's true, but I do think there are ways that you could do things differently. Statistically, most nonprofits who are doing, especially community-based work, don't have any more than a couple months worth of reserves to survive this. And that is terrifying. So as you're thinking about that, and you're working with philanthropy to keep you alive and to strategize with, there are ways that you could also pivot a little bit to work with tech people to see how much technology you can use to get your work done. And what are the services that you're offering that you are actually deeming essential? What are those things that will make it to the other side as well? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. All of these, stimulus packages, everybody's calling you, get on the next webinar, do this, do that. There's money available. It can freeze you because you're already feeling the stress. I want you to slow down for a minute and understand that there really are things in these stimulus packages that can be helpful. We get afraid when we start to talk about loans and we want to just do grants. But right now, that's just not available. It's not realistic right now. And so go out, make application to the multiple stimulus packages that are available to you right now, be it economic injury distress loans, things that are coming out through the CARES package, some of the small business loans that are available, particularly for nonprofits. Nothing cures stress more than to kind of know where you're going to stand later. And that movement will be very empowering for you as you're busily trying to serve your agency and ensure that your staff and the work that you love continues. So I'm down to the last couple of minutes. I'm going to go to my last slide, which is it's weathering the storm. So what does it mean to weather a storm in this? First of all, breathe. I was thinking about some of the things that Dr. Smith was saying, that it is really tough right now and you're on high alert and the emails are coming in fast and furious. And I'm talking to people working 14, 16-hour days. Sick leaders cannot lead. If you are overworking, if you are not scheduling some time to be away from your phone and your computer, that you're sending these reports to your philanthropic institutions to let them know you're still viable, you have got to walk away for a second. You have got to schedule time to be with those families that are in your house, those pets that are looking at you and wondering why you're still home, everything around you that can bring you joy outside of work. You've got to schedule that in. Rewrite your story. How compelling is your mission anymore? What is it going to look like on the other side of this? Look at your case statement and see, is it something that you really want to be doing on the other side of this? Crises make you really focus in on what's important. This could be a great time for you to consider your case. Talk to everybody, not just inside of your home, but to your colleagues. It is okay to feel like you are failing. I have been there. I have been there when money has disappeared from the philanthropic, and government sector, and it's scary, and you want to go inside yourself. This is not the time to do that. Talk to your colleagues, team up with those people who care about you, and work towards solutions. And last, I'm going to encourage you to collaborate. Not like the good old days when you were forced into collaboration. I don't know if I call those good old days, but be smart about the collaborative efforts that you are considering now. It could be the time that you and other colleagues talk about working together in more formalized ways to ensure the services that you think are important survive. There are going to be a lot of mergers and combining your resources over the next, not just few months, guys, over the next couple of years, if not longer. So get ahead of that so you are making those choices. My heart is reaching out to everyone who's leading an agency right now who's feeling this stress, but I'm telling you, breathe, rewrite your story, talk to others, and collaborate. And when we do get to the other side of this paradigm shift, you'll be here to talk about what you went through. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Russell, for that transparent, robust, insightful perspective. And certainly we will keep that in mind, how we address those strategies from philanthropy, systems, community engagement, and how we should respond at this critical juncture. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we examine healing strategies and interventions, we as thought leaders offer that it's necessary to examine healing strategies from the diverse spiritual and faith-based perspective. How do we connect ourselves, our work, and families as healers? What is the role of self-reflection, prayer, and meditation? Dr. David Brock will assist us in examining and assessing this aspect from the diverse faith-based perspective. Dr. Brock is the managing director of family and community engagement for Second Chance Incorporated and oversees the organization's training, support, and community services. Dr. Brock has more than 20 years of experience in community engagement and presently serves as the lead pastor of Love Fellowship Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Please welcome Dr. Brock.
Thank you, Brace. I appreciate this opportunity to share with you guys. As the slide said, healing the healer. Who does the healer turn to when the healer needs to be healed is a question that comes to mind. And for some, something that we can look at is in this field of work that we give and do. When you work in the field of serving others, it's so often the healer focuses so much on serving others that the healer forgets to serve themselves. And so the question becomes, is it possible to serve in this field of serving others and never be affected by the many things that we see? Jay, who control the next slide, please? And so the question becomes, it's a consciousness or the spirit that I like to call it. The spirit understands when it's unstable and when it's wounded. And that is when self needs healing to create a balance. You may have heard the statement, the plumber's house needs plumbing, the carpenter's house needs carpentry work, the electrician's house needs electricians, the painter's house needs to be painted. These are all cliches that we use to demonstrate the fact that we're focusing so much on doing and giving out that we forget to take time to focus on our own needs. And this becomes a dangerous place for us, if you will, when we don't focus on our own needs. There's some writing on the screen that says, take care of yourselves, for you must take care of the helpless beggar within inside of you. You must embrace him or her. You must talk with him or her. You must do something that shows that you acknowledge his or her presence. You must promise to give your all to heal and look after him or her. The summation of that statement is that you have to take care of you before you can take care of someone else. It's the plain simple thought of, if you take a glass and you fill a glass with water and you begin to pour out that water from that glass without refilling, eventually that glass or that water runs out. So you want to understand that you are the first level of serving others. You have to be whole yourself. On the next slide, please, Jay. So Mark Twain wrote and said, "The physician who knows only medicine knows not even medicine." And so what he was saying was that the art of healing others starts with healing ourselves. And there are many different areas that we could focus on in terms of healing and in terms of the healer being healed. I listed 5, but I just want to focus on 2. The last 2 being mind and body, which is managing your stress, managing emotions, and social connection. In both of those, that topic has been covered beautifully by Dr. Smith and by Dr. Betsy Farmer and Eliza White. They covered that, and even Dr. Sherrill talked about, again, the need to take care of mind and body. Without us all talking to each other, it's interesting that common thing and thread of taking care of yourself, your mind, and your body came across from all the presenters. But you look, when you think of mind and body, you still want to look at those people whom you love and who you care deeply for in your life. List those people, check on those people, speak with those people, and make sure that they're okay and they can make sure you're okay. You want to look at what are the top 3 stressors in your life. And make sure that you're doing something to deal with those stressors. And then the last point that I want to make about the body is do what you have to do to relax and wind down. You got to find some way to wind down. I have made it my business. We had the biggest challenge, the weight loss challenge. So I made sure that I told my team and staff this morning on our check-in, I said, hey, you got to do something. So I told them, I said, the last thing I want to have happen is me to walk back into the office and I've suffered corona pounds. I have not exercised. I have not given myself to some form of relief or some stress. So you want to do something that will help you to unwind at the end of the day. The next slide, Jay. So I believe in keeping a conscious contact with God or a higher power makes a world of difference when we talk about health. And I believe that science and both myself, I believe it, and science proves that prayer and meditation will help to reduce depression, anxiety, and stress in large numbers. And prayer and meditations are highly effective in lowering our reactionary measures to traumatic and negative events that happen in our lives. And I'm very clear on the fact that when we talk about spirituality, it's not easy to talk about spirituality because many people believe in different methods and different ways of practicing their spirituality. There could be Islam, Christianity, Buddhism. We know that today is Passover for the Jewish community. So we have these different spiritual outlets. And then there are some that have what they consider spiritual outlets without religion. The drive for spirituality is inherent in our nature. It is the way that our spiritual path unfolds in the unique purpose in every person's lives. And there are many ways that, again, as I said, that spirituality can be practiced. But let me present you with a broad definition of spirituality. Spirituality is the worldview, a way of life based on a belief that there is more to life that meets this sense, more to the universe than just purposeless mechanics. There is something bigger out here. There is something bigger going on. So spirituality involves the belief that there is a higher form of intelligence or consciousness running the universe, if you will. And we don't all believe the same way. We don't all practice the same way. So whatever the source that connects you to meaningful hope, peace, love, and connectedness is what you want to do. What aspects of spiritual practice do you find most helpful? Whatever those things are that you find helpful, you want to lean into those things. You want to do those things. And how does belief affect the way that we practice healing in others? You got to understand that my moral compass, the way that I believe, we call it the golden rule. Most of us, regardless of whatever religion you practice, has the sentiments of the golden rule, which is do unto others as you want others to do unto you. How would I treat somebody else in this circumstance? How would I want to be treated in this circumstances? So when we talk about healing ourselves spiritually, it is grounding ourselves in that ability to have and be empathetic toward other people. So we understand this pandemic is running crazy. We're being told to stay in. We're being told not to go here. I love the term that Dr. Betsy used instead of talking about social distancing. You know, I love the different term that she used. We're not trying to distance ourselves socially because we need connective. We're built for relationship. So before I can give to others, before I can heal others, there's some things that I like to try to practice in my spiritual man. And that's why I try to start my day with prayer and meditation. I calm my mind and I align my thoughts and actions for the day. I focus on the critical personal matters and professional issues that I have to deal with. And then I begin my day trying to come from that perspective. So when I talk about healing myself, before I can give to others, I have to be whole. There's a saying that we use: hurt people hurt people. Wounded people wound people. And when you are broken and when you are hurting, even on your best day, you can still end up bleeding on somebody else, still end up hurting somebody else. So it is important that you step back for a moment. As Dr. Smith said, step back, take a moment to think about yourself. Dr. Schill said, breathe. Dr. Betsy said it. Everybody said, you matter first in so many ways across this thread. So take a moment and step back. Next slide, Jay, as I get out of here. It's hard to get a pastor and a preacher who hasn't been in the pulpit because the churches are closed and you give him a microphone for a couple minutes. So I got to wind this thing down. So how do you heal yourself? One, I believe that you have to pray. I believe that is important. James 4:8 says, if you come nigh to God, if you draw to God, if you call on God, he will come to you. You have to pray. Read your Bible, your Quran, chant, whatever your religious practice is, whatever way that you connect to your belief system, you want to do that. You want to heal yourself is what I loved when someone pointed out. It's grounding meditation. Dr. Smith said breathing technique. So it's taking that moment to ground yourself so that you don't react negatively to everything that is going on. Listen, you can't watch CNN, NBC, ABC, and hear from the CDC and the president, and you can't just hear all this information and take all this influx of information and not do something to balance yourself with it. So as you heal, I want to leave you with these three things. One, self-healing. This means accepting who you are from a physical, psychological, and spiritual perspective. It means treating yourself with kindness, gentle, and in a supportive way, the same way that you would support a loved one. You want to support yourself in that same way. Number two, whatever you do, don't forget to live. All right. When healing, people tend to slow down and stop living. When we give out to others and we do for others and we give 16 and 18 and 20 hours to give into others, we can sometimes forget about living ourselves. Whatever you do, stop and take a proper approach to living and healing. So last but not least, I want you to recognize that even spiritually, as you practice your spirituality, not everything will be resolved. You can't fix everything. Paul wrote and he pleaded and asked God to remove the thorn that was in his side. God turned to Paul and said, hey, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. Meaning I'm going to give you strength to do what you have to do, but I'm not going to fix everything in your life. So we need to understand, even as we walk with God, walk in our spiritual approach, not everything in life is going to be fixed. But we can understand, just as God gave Paul strength and he compensated Paul to live a meaningful life, when we find balance between our inner man and that's what we need, and we'll find it possible to live a life filled with grace. So whatever you do, take care of you, heal you first, and then seek to heal others. It's like being on the airplane. Put your mask on first and then help somebody else. Thank you, Brace, for this time.
Thank you, Dr. Brock. That was excellent, and we really appreciate those powerful words of comfort, inspiration, empowerment, and certainly self-healing will come, certainly must come first. And also, just inspiration in the morning to start each and every day. And so we certainly will take those tips to heart and try to implement the same. Well, certainly, everyone, in closing, I just want to end by saying thank you once again to our speakers, our child welfare professionals, first responders, and thought leaders for your persistence, resiliency, strategic resolve during this unprecedented time. I also want to thank everyone for participating in this important discussion today. We are humbled by the response and the contributions from each of you on a daily basis. We pray this webinar provided some insight, inspiration, and hope towards positive change. We will have a recording of today's webinar on our Second Chance website. So if you missed any part of it, please go on and check it out. And lastly, I'd like to leave you with this quote. Persistence can change failure into extraordinary achievement. Therefore, it's not whether you get knocked down, but how you get up and respond. Let's rise up and respond together. Thank you all for your time, attention. Be safe, stay strong.
Thank you so much, Brace. That concludes our webinar today. As Brace said, we will be posting this on our website